Oliver Larkin, thank you so much for joining me. Please introduce yourself. Tell us who you are, what race you're running in, and what your goal is getting involved in politics in the beautiful year of 2026.
Yeah, great to join you, Eric. My name's Oliver Larkin. I'm a first time candidate, 33 years old, running for Congress here in South Florida, where I grew up. I'm from Fort Lauderdale originally, currently living in Deerfield Beach. The wonderful 23rd District covers parts of Broward and Palm Beach County. And what brought me into this race? Last year, I was doing a lot of reflecting with Trump being back in office. I worked on Bernie Sanders' presidential campaign in 2016, and so I was doing a lot of reflecting on what the past decade of my life had been about and what it had all been for, and whether I was just going to continue doing the same thing in the hopes of producing a different outcome, or whether I was willing to step forward and actually being the candidate that I for so long have wanted to see in South Florida. And so I decided that the time was right, and particularly with the incumbent I'm running against, our district needed a voice. And so I was prepared to volunteer very early on after the 2024 election, but by around mid-year last year, it became clear that if I didn't jump in this race, nobody else would. And I really needed to, and our community needed to step up and have a real choice on the ballot this year. So that's why I'm running, and so excited to be here with you.
Well, Oliver, what is it? It's March 5th, 2026. And just a few days ago, the United States bombed Iran. In the first strikes, they killed 165 school children in a girls' elementary school. I'm sure you've seen some of these shocking photos and videos coming out of the war zone that the United States has created over in the Middle East. And for many here and for abroad, it's fairly top of mind. If elected to Congress, how would you differ from Jared Moskowitz in your approach to handling the situation?
Yeah, well, Congressman Moskowitz is one of the only House Democrats that is currently opposing the bipartisan war powers resolution introduced by Thomas Massie and Ro Khanna. And he even went so far as to call it the Ayatollah Protection Act. So he has really gone above and beyond most members of Congress. And so I would certainly protect constitutional war powers authority under the Congress. And I would seek to exercise that authority to claw back any military ability from the president to launch these unwanted, illegal, unauthorized wars. It's really disgusting what we're seeing happen, because in addition to Congressman Moskowitz's very hawkish foreign policy stance, and he has explicitly named Marco Rubio, Tom Cotton, Lindsey Graham, the most neoconservative, warmongering Republicans in Congress and in the Trump administration. He's also invested very heavily in Lockheed Martin. He joined Congress in 2023 and has purchased Lockheed stock on 4 separate occasions since he joined Congress. And following these Iran strikes, Lockheed stock hit an all-time high price on the stock market this Monday. So there's a really disgusting element of personal profit to the also ideological bent that Congressman Moskowitz has against the Iranian regime. We just found a clip last night of him in committee in September of 2023, so even before October 7th, saying that we needed to have joint military exercises and weapons testing in the Middle East to show the Iranian regime, to make them, quote, understand what we're capable of doing. And now we see, unfortunately, what we're capable of doing. But this has already been apparent, obviously, with the United States support for the genocide in Gaza and the apartheid in the West Bank. What we're seeing now with the bombing of a girls' school in Minab in Iran is the same story that we've seen with the bombing of hospitals and schools in Gaza for more than 2 years now. So unfortunately, this is a continuation of a foreign policy that Congressman Moskowitz has been very explicit in supporting, and he's even gone so far as to introduce the House resolution to bar the State Department from citing data from the Gaza Health Ministry. So when you hear him talking about this war powers resolution that would simply require the president to seek constitutional approval before launching military strikes, that's what's in the Constitution. It's the letter of the law. But he's willing to undermine that to, again, pursue this ideological bent that is very much the priority of AIPAC and the Israel lobby ultimately. And we've even heard Marco Rubio say as much, that Israel was going to launch a preemptive strike on Iran, that the United States simply stepped in with these military strikes because rather than exerting our leverage over a purported ally that we spend tens of billions of dollars supporting militarily and saying, hey, maybe we should condition this aid against starting an unprovoked preemptive war. Instead, the United States just used Israel's justification to go ahead and launch a war with even less pretext than the Iraq War. And I'm old enough to remember that and how much effort the Bush administration had to put into this all-out public relations blitz, going to the United Nations, making the case internationally, and even then, it was predicated upon lies. We see even less effort and even less respect for the American people's intelligence from this Trump administration, and unfortunately, from Congressman Moskowitz, who is giving them a complete blank check to take us to this war.
I know in the past you've expressed sentiment around potentially banning members of Congress from trading stocks. And I know maybe you yourself don't want to do that, but if you are elected to Congress, do commit today to feeding me insider information to then go ahead and trade on my own stocks. Is that okay? Would you mind, like, maybe in a Signal chat or a Telegram channel or something? But like, I know you yourself, but like, is that okay? Or can we agree to that right now?
I've seen the pitfalls of relying on Signal for secure communication. So unfortunately, I cannot commit to any such thing today. But what I will do is try to build a more equitable economy that anyone who invests in the stock market can get predictable results without having the lion's share of the profits going to Wall Street and the top 0.1%. Everyone should be able to enjoy participating in the economy, and of course, that should include strong labor protections and protections for working people and guaranteeing the universal basic economic rights that everyone should have. So, no guarantees that I can commit to feeding you insider trading information, but what I will do is try to make our economy more predictable and less chaotic. And this kind of disaster capitalism that we see currently, that is so often used to exploit the global South, when we see Hurricane Maria ripping through Puerto Rico, and then the disaster capitalism of privatizing the energy grid. Certainly, what we may expect to see in Iran. We just saw, after Maduro's removal in Venezuela, the fact that the United States is now trying to privatize the Venezuelan oil industry. So we need to protect national sovereignty of our neighbors in the globe, and we also should not let Wall Street completely run away with our economy and have members of Congress engaging in this very immoral and unethical conduct. So sorry.
All right. Well, that wasn't necessarily what I was hoping for, but that's okay. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, I believe you're going on the shows of both Mike from PA and also potentially Hassan's stream. I don't know if later today or sometime in the not too distant future. I know they are competing over who knows each other, or rather, who knows you best. I'm assuming Hassan's going to ask this, and I'm assuming Mike from PA is probably going to ask something similar. Can you commit to 3 different campaign promises that you want to run on in a Zoran style manner?
Yeah, I think what we need to do is pass Medicare for all at the federal level. We have the highest income nation in the world that does not guarantee healthcare as a human right, and we pay twice as much per capita as comparable neighbors for our healthcare. So we're getting a raw deal, and I'm going to fight to ensure Medicare for every single person, not Medicare for those who want it or a public option or some watered down plan. There's legislation that has been introduced in Congress for decades now. It is the Medicare for All Act, and that is what I will support. It will abolish private insurance, and it will guarantee healthcare to every single person from the day of birth until the day of death. So Medicare for all. We also need to abolish and prosecute ICE and really look at this entire Department of Homeland Security and the post 9/11 security state apparatus that is being taken to an authoritarian end. And finally, we need to end the genocide in Gaza and end U.S. military interventions abroad, so that we can invest at home in universal childcare and paid family and medical leave and public transportation. These are the kind of policies that we need to invest in, and it's going to take ending the forever wars in Congress to that end.
I think I was most interested in learning more about your campaign when I saw a tweet that you had put out specifically about, I believe it was after the Super Bowl, regarding Ronald Reagan funding far right death squads in Nicaragua, specifically the Contras. Can you tell me more about? I believe you mentioned your wife's family is from Nicaragua. Can you tell me more about her story, her family's story, and what the Contras mean in your life and also your wife's family?
Yeah, and there's a really, really dark history here. So back in 1979, during the revolution. So there's a long history of U.S. military occupation in Nicaragua in the first half of the 20th century. It was really part of this Monroe Doctrine of the United States intervening militarily and occupying other countries. That's one reason, incidentally, why Nicaragua has baseball as such a popular sport, because the U.S. Marines occupied the country for almost 2 decades. And so the popularity of American baseball came through U.S. military occupation. And Sandino, who was a leader in Nicaraguan resistance to U.S. empire, he's the namesake of the Sandinista movement. And one thing that I found really interesting in studying this history is that one of the alumni of my alma mater, Phillips Exeter Academy in New Hampshire, a very well-to-do boarding school that has students from all across the country. Actually, one of the original 9 Sandinista comandantes, Luis Carrion Cruz, was an Exeter student. He came from a well-off Nicaraguan family. He came to the United States, was educated, and was so disgusted by what he saw during the Vietnam War that he actually dropped out of Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, went back home to Nicaragua, took his father's hunting rifle, and went into the mountains to become a guerrilla fighting with the Sandinistas. And so there was a terrible patriarchal family dynasty, the Somoza dynasty, that was very much an ally of the United States for several decades, an absolutely brutal, repressive, right-wing regime that used the national police as their own secret military police force. That's actually my wife's grandfather, who was a tyrant who was killed in the 1972 earthquake, was a member of that national police force. And so when the revolution happened in 1979, my wife's grandmother was a bilingual secretary with the U.S. Embassy in Managua. She was suspected of being a spy. My father-in-law had been drafted into the Sandinista army. And so through my wife's grandmother's connections with the American Embassy, they were able to find a way out, coming over to the United States as teenagers, pregnant with my sister-in-law back in 1984. And really, Ronald Reagan granted amnesty. That's something that is so foreign to the far-right dialogue in the Republican Party when it comes to immigration reform. But Ronald Reagan granted amnesty to those fleeing the Contra War. That maybe it's a silver lining, because ultimately this is what Ronald Reagan was funding through the CIA and with the Iran Contra. It's, again, history rhymes. We see the Iran Contra controversy and now what is playing out in Iran. It's an unfortunate part of our history. But so the Reagan administration funds these right-wing death squads at the same time that they are funding the far-right military in El Salvador, at the same time that they are funding far-right paramilitary groups or dictatorships all across Latin America and, in fact, across the entire world. So what the promise of the Sandinista revolution was, similar to the Cuban Revolution and many others, what did not originally start out as an antagonistic relationship with the United States. That was not the ultimate intent of these revolutions, but the United States brings all of this pressure to bear for ideological purposes and creates the conditions on which these revolutionary governments have to take these extraordinary measures to just protect their own sovereignty and devote so many resources into fighting against imperial intervention at the expense of the healthcare and infrastructure and housing and education promises that they originally made and ran on, that were being so neglected under the previous dictatorship. So it's an unfortunate part of history, but I do think that gives a strong sense of clarity as to the United States' role in the world. It was only because of this intervention that my wife's family immigrated to the United States, and where she was born in the Northern Virginia area, right around Washington, D.C. So I think there are some other interesting parallels. I was born on the 4th of July. My wife was born on Juneteenth. We have these very, very disparate kind of family situations that also bring us together and are two sides of the coin of the American story. And so that's something that I've really wrestled with and done a lot of research about. We both have, and there's a wonderful book that I would plug that was so illuminating to me of the Contra War. It's called Blood of Brothers by Stephen Kinzer, who was the New York Times bureau chief in Managua in the 1980s, and I think gives a pretty even-handed approach. He's not does not save the Sandinista government from criticism, but I think really does the appropriate contextualizing of just how far the Reagan administration was going with their lies, just bald-faced lies to the White House press corps in press briefings, and kind of hiding behind the subterfuge of the Central Intelligence Agency. And ultimately, who gets hurt the most in any war? It's not the fighters, it is the civilians, it is the elderly, the sick, the vulnerable, the children, the non-combatants who are suffering, and who during the Contra War were even without direct conflict with mines, with roadside improvised explosive devices. The same thing that we've seen happen over and over and again with these insurgent campaigns that the United States has involved ourselves in, whether directly or through proxies, like the Contras. So it's again an unfortunate part of our history, and we even see now the issues in Nicaragua with a repressive regime that has really, again, it's tried to insulate itself because of this very overt U.S. intervention. And we sanction one third of the countries in the world. We really pick and choose winners in a way that uh, the United States probably would say we don't, and we try to take an even-handed approach, but we really do, and it is oftentimes predicated on these ideological grounds, and it leads to people suffering. It's not so much about punishing the regimes in power. It is the effect it has on people, and we see this right now with the embargo in Cuba that has purportedly been to destabilize the regime. That's endured for 60 years or longer. So it does not achieve the purported end, but it does inflict pain and suffering and misery on people very needlessly. And so I think it's an indicator of how we need to change our foreign policy approach more broadly, not just with the current intervention in Iran, but with how we interact with nations globally.
How do you view sanctions as a tool to shape the global economy and the local economies of various countries around the world? Do you think they're an appropriate tool for the United States to use in countries such as Cuba or various Latin American countries that the United States has sanctioned throughout the years? Or do you think it's maybe a form of collective punishment?
I think that is the correct phrase to use. It is collective punishment. As I said, the United States sanctions about a third of the countries in the world. Jeff Stein, the reporter when he was with the Washington Post, did a long investigative series looking at this, and this really does go to the global capitalism and globalization of the economy. The United States does work with dictators in countries with far right governments that it finds are pliant and willing to play ball and come to the table to achieve U.S. And global corporate interests in the economy. So the collective punishment aspect is not the exception to the rule. It is increasingly the rule of United States foreign policy. So to my mind, I think that we really need to look at starting with a completely clean slate. The United States' hands are not clean. We are one of the only countries, along with Israel, that is refusing to stop the genocide in Gaza. We are guilty of so many war crimes in so many different countries, whether it is Palestine, now Iran, or other countries across the world that we've seen over decades. So the United States needs to really re examine these sanctions. Diplomacy should be a tool, and I view sanctions as less of a diplomatic tool than of more of a violent uh, action that we even saw in Venezuela. There were predictions that were very predictable in the first Trump administration that said when we leveraged the kind of sanctions that we did on the Venezuelan economy, that it was going to create an out-migration crisis of millions and millions of people. So this was entirely predictable, but it's part of a plan. There is a plan here with these decisions, but the plan is not a good one. It is not a moral or just plan. It is a plan to manufacture a crisis that can be used then to exploit politically. With Venezuela, we leveraged these sanctions. We created an out-migration crisis so that then Trump and the far right could use the out-migration crisis and say, look at these caravans. They're all coming to invade. They're using this very militaristic language of invasion, of invaders and foreign armies. And it's not just the United States that is hosting Venezuelan migrants. It is Colombia, it is Peru, it is Argentina, it is Brazil, it is Mexico by the millions. So the United States also, like, we like to look at ourselves as the kind of only one that is housing these refugees, but it is a much broader issue. But ultimately, it does trace back to the United States as the most powerful economy in the world deciding to do collective punishment of the people of Venezuela so that then it can be used to be exploited with temporary protected status, with the propaganda of who is among the Venezuelan refugees. And we also see that collective punishment in Palestine as well with the indiscriminate bombing. So whether it is sanctions or overt military violence, the United States uses collective punishment really as the letter of the law rather than the exception to it.
Tell me, I guess I'm very interested to hear more about your specific district. Tell me, what's the demographic? Are folks white? Are they Latino? Are they old? Are they young? Are they wealthy? Are they who lives in your district, and who are the folks who you're trying to represent?
Yeah. So our district is among the wealthiest in the state of Florida. We were also the closest congressional race in 2024. So it is drawn to be a quote unquote competitive district with much of the working class, black and brown areas drawn out of it. With that being said, South Florida is a wonderfully diverse community, and about 30% of our district was born outside of the United States. Little over half of our district are white. We've got about 13 to 15% of our district are Black Americans and African American. Our Latino population is about 25%. There are maybe 5% Asian population from across the diaspora. So that's roughly the breakdown. In terms of demographics, in addition to Spanish being the second largest language spoken in the district, there's a very significant number of Portuguese speaking Brazilian immigrants in our community, one of the highest in the entire country, particularly in the areas of Pompano Beach and Deerfield Beach. We also have a slice of Haitian Creole speakers, although a lot of that, the much larger segment of Haitian Americans are, again, drawn into other districts in South Florida. But there's a great deal of diversity, language diversity, country of origin, ethnic and religious diversity. We have one of the largest Jewish populations in the entire country in our district. There's also Florida Atlantic University, a public university with 31,000 enrolled undergraduate students and about 4 or 5,000 graduate students. Our district is a little bit older proportionately than the average one, in addition to being slightly wealthier. We've also seen, as the income level has risen in the district, the poverty level has also risen. So this is an unequal district. It is one that is really at the epicenter of the housing affordability crisis. We're seeing those young people and working class people get pushed out to the margins, whether they are moving to other parts of our state or moving out of the state. Florida Atlantic University did a poll last fall that found that 1/4 of Floridians are seriously considering leaving our state, and upwards of half are either somewhat or seriously considering leaving the state. So this is really gets to the heart of the economy and the income and wealth inequality that we're seeing. So that's really the kind of overview of the district. It's been represented by a Democrat for the past 15 years. So this is, while it is quote unquote competitive, I would still say the Republican Party has kind of hit their high watermark here in 2022 and 2024, and two really bad election years for Democrats. So but I think what we're getting at is that this is really the kind of district that the Democratic Party would like to say, run a moderate, run a middle of the road candidate, run a milquetoast centrist neoliberal that is going to cater to the corporate class and the billionaire class. And I think what our campaign is trying to assert is that the kind of politics that I'm running on, a democratic socialist philosophy where the economy is democratically controlled and works for everyone, is increasingly the winning message that we need, not just in the deep blue parts of the country, but in quote unquote swing districts like this, because the economy is bad for most working class people right now. And we really need change for the working class. And so that's who I hope to represent in our district, the working class, young people, union members, but also people struggling with their rent, with their property insurance, people who just cannot get by in this economy. We are the epicenter of spring break, so we're a very tourism driven economy. We're going to have people from all across the country from different colleges coming down to South Florida very soon. And so we're very fortunate to be where we are in a beautiful part of the country, one of the only tracts of living coral reef ecosystem in the United States right off of our coast. I'm a PADI certified scuba diver. So I see every day the really precious environment that we have to protect. And that is, again, being threatened by these Republican policies and increasingly by Democrats like my opponent who take the corporate PAC money from Chevron and continue to kind of sell our community out from under us. And I think that's a central thrust as well. Just the ways that the Democratic Party has sold out our community and made this such a vulnerable district to be the next domino to fall to the Republicans. I don't want that to happen. So that's why I decided to run.
Let me ask you this, because you mentioned that as your district gets wealthier, I think it was what, 13% of your constituents over the age of 65 live in poverty. I think it was somewhere around 11 or 12% of the young folks live in poverty as well. I mean, these numbers, I'm sure you can imagine, these are unacceptable, of course. I think it's an entirely terrifying premise that as AI gets more and more powerful, and big corporations become more willing to lay off their workers and automate away their workforces, those numbers, especially among the younger demographics, are probably going to go up and up. And even though a good portion of your demographic in your district is well off, even if they're, middle managers or even high level folks who do knowledge work, there's a very good chance, unless they themselves own and operate large corporations, even a lot of the small business owners, more likely than not, are going to see some massive impacts as a consequence of automation, whether it is digitally via AI or robots physically taking over people's jobs. What is your game plan for ensuring that these folks can survive the foreseeable future?
Yeah, I'm really glad you asked that question because I think for so long we've kind of looked at jobs that can be automated away as just the kiosks in fast food restaurants and the kind of impersonalization. We live in, I think, with our capitalistic society, which in fact has very few capitalists. Most people are workers. Most people sell their labor to a capitalist to earn a wage or a salary. So we live in a capitalistic society with very few capitalists. Most people are working class, and that is true. And I think what we're seeing with this current AI spree that is running through our economy is that capitalists are not just looking down at the workers working on a grill or taking an order in a restaurant. They look down on any worker. It's the junior account executive writing advertising copy. I Before I got into politics, I worked at an advertising agency here in South Florida called Zimmerman Advertising. It's retail advertising. Think your Papa John's, your Auto Nation, your Kentucky Fried Chicken, this kind of stuff. And this is an industry that is being completely impacted by AI. When you think about how many different iterations of a Facebook ad can you write, a human being can do it and create some ingenious and novel approaches. But with AI, you can just achieve so much scale, so much faster. And it might be replicating what a human being has thought of and repurposing it. But that doesn't matter to the executives that are just looking for the greatest efficiency. They're looking to zero out their labor costs as much as they can to take more and more of a profit. And that's something that we hear from people in the district. This is a district where more people than average have a bachelor's degree. Many older families have sent their kids to college and are working in quote unquote white collar professions. And this is an industry that is being really impacted by AI. And I think we're just now on the very verge of what could be a massive disruption in the labor market. I myself have been laid off because of AI. In 2023 and 2024, I was working at a job where I was training an AI tool to help write, again, advertising copy. And by the time I finished training it at the end of 2024, I was laid off because the company could make more money with fewer employees, taking on more clients individually and using this AI tool to assist them in doing so. So I've been directly impacted by this, and I think we need more members of Congress who understand the stakes, because the economy for us is just so tenuous. This is not the economy anymore, and it hasn't been for quite some time. Where you are a fresh-faced college graduate and you walk into the boss's office and you say, "I'm the person for the job," and you work there for the next 30 years. We're in these recursive cycles of employment and layoffs and trying to be rehired. And what that also does is it keeps your wages stagnant. It creates the conditions where you are increasingly vulnerable and have this tenuous employment, and it's that tenuousness that makes you more susceptible to take whatever the boss is willing to give you. So I think really this is a moment for unions to step forward. This is a moment for people to organize collectively and bargain for our rights. But when it comes to AI, there needs to be much greater regulation over this industry. Um, there's been, as I'm sure you've seen, some really disturbing manipulations of people's likenesses, especially when it comes to political advertising and
Yeah.
sharing information online. There's just a very deceptive quality that could really be used for some terrifying ends. So I think we need much greater regulation over the AI industry. We need to have labor protections and job protections for people. This was part of a labor struggle that occurred in 2024 with the Writers Guild strikes, not wanting to have this AI slop become the norm for the content that these production companies put out. And as we see more of these production companies merge, there are fewer and fewer executives taking more and more of the pie, and the quality of just our movies, our art, our creativity, it's declining because the creators are not being paid a fair wage, and artists, actors are being asked to sign their rights away to their own likenesses, if they're even asked at all, because a lot of this is done without their permission. So I think this is a incredibly important part of reforming our economy, and really it ties in as well with the energy consumption and the need to put a moratorium on these AI data centers. We cannot have a system where we are sucking up millions and billions of gallons of water when we are in a resource starved situation due to global climate change, man-made climate change. We cannot have these resources drained and our energy prices increased because there's more AI slop out there. It's just not the direction that our economy needs to be moving in. And I think it, again, to the more nefarious end, it breeds more cynicism, it breeds more distrust, and it allows for the spread of more misinformation and disinformation in ways that are going to continue to threaten nation states and democracies all across the world. It's going to ultimately be to the service of dictators and authoritarian governments that can use this new AI technology to serve their own ends. And so we've also seen um, oligarchs like Jeff Bezos talk about how all Amazon jobs are going to be automated away one day. That is ultimately the goal. Amazon's one of the largest employers in the United States. If those jobs go away, we're just going to continue to see a hollowing out. I think that's why organizing efforts like the Amazon Labor Union are so important, because we've seen the concessions that these companies have to make when people organize and stand together, that wages are raised, that benefits are increased. But on the other hand, they're still going to look for ways to just completely zero out the labor market. And so organized labor and working people generally really need to stand together in this moment, and are going to need allies in Congress that understand the issue and that are going to go on and take on the AI and billionaire oligarchs that are trying to control our economy and increasingly spend money in the political economy to elect representatives of their choice.
You mentioned socialism a few times there. Would you consider yourself to be a socialist?
Yeah, I would consider myself to be a democratic socialist. I am not a capitalist.
Wonderful. And I believe you have the endorsement of DSA. Is that correct?
Yeah, for the first time in history in Florida, a federal candidate is running with the endorsements of the Miami, Broward, and Palm Beach Treasure Coast DSA chapters. And I'm very proud to run on that platform because I see it as a real marker of democratic accountability. This is not just my campaign, this is our campaign of our chapter and of our joint South Florida chapters. My campaign manager is co chair of our Broward DSA chapter. Our field director, our communications and video production staff. And I frankly couldn't do this without them, and I wouldn't want to do it without them. We need a coherent party project and ideology that people can look at and trust and understand that our elected officials and our candidates have this commitment, and it's not just blowing with the wind of which direction public opinion is going in or what the corporate media is going to favor in their coverage. This is a uh, distinct program that contrasts with the corporate wing of the Democratic Party. But what we're talking about is not radical. We're talking about the popular issues that the majority of Americans, regardless of their partisan ideology or political affiliation, believe in, like universal health care, like public education, like one job should be enough and that workers deserve more. And also, I mean, we're in a real battle for our democracy right now. And I think it is to the detriment of really truth telling for the Democratic Party to say, we need to protect our democracy. We need to protect our democracy. For so many in this country, it has not been a democracy in the first place. If you look at the residents of Washington, D.C., they've never had taxation with representation. They've never had senators or an elected voting member of the House of Representatives. So if we're going to really turn the corner on this authoritarian moment in our country and in countries around the world that are struggling with authoritarianism, we're going to need to have more democratic control over not just politics, but the economy as well, with things like Medicare for all, nationalizing the energy grid to confront the true nature and scale of the climate crisis so that we can have 100% renewable energy. We need to nationalize public transportation so that everyone can get around and do that free of cost. So I think when we talk about democratic socialism and what our chapter runs on as priorities with immigrant justice, with abortion clinic defense, these all comport with what my priorities would be in Congress. And so I'm very proud to be running with the support of our chapters. And we're in the process of speaking with national DSA as well, and hopefully can make this part of a national effort.
Oftentimes you don't get a chance to really explain why you voted in a certain way. Obviously, you can do that after the fact. Most people aren't going to read that. They don't care. They just see the vote. So let's play a quick little game where all you have to do, say yes, thumbs up, no, thumbs down, sort of thing. I'm just going to speed run through a few bullet points. Say yes, like I'll give you a real low hanging fruit. You can say yes, Medicare for all.
Yes, aye,
Okay. Banning members of Congress from trading stocks.
aye, yes,
Implementing the Green New Deal.
yes, absolutely.
Abolishing ICE.
Yes, and prosecuting.
That's the next one. Prosecuting ICE and Christine Ohm.
Yes, absolutely. And I would include in that the private prison contractors working with ICE.
Canceling student loan debt.
Absolutely. Yes.
Building high speed rail.
Yes. And public high speed rail. We have high speed rail in Florida. It's privatized under Brightline. Rick Scott's an investor in it. We need to publicize that.
Rick, he doesn't. What? I didn't know he was an investor in that. Really?
Okay. Yeah. Quick aside. When
Okay.
Barack Obama passed funding for for high speed rail funding, John Mica, who is a Republican congressman, as a Republican congressman in Florida, was chair of an important House committee. They secured funding for publicly funded high speed rail in Florida and some other states that would connect Tampa and Orlando. Rick Scott vetoed that funding. He declined the federal funding, and then he went behind everyone's back after declining billions of dollars in federal funding for public high speed rail, and he invested in All Aboard Florida, which became Brightline. And so now Brightline is the only privatized passenger rail system in the United States. And it started in Florida, but they're building Brightline West right now. They're connecting Los Angeles to Las Vegas. Democrats across the country are behind it. Pete Buttigieg came down to Florida during the Biden administration and did a tour of the Brightline stations and looked at what a wonderful project this is. So you've got Democrats doing public relations work for the private investment vehicle of Rick Scott, one of the most corrupt governors who, before being elected governor and later senator, was CEO of a company that committed the largest Medicare fraud in U.S. history. So this is who the Democrats are, unfortunately, just supporting with this policy. So yes, quick tangent, but I had to get that out there.
That's crazy. If you go on Hassan's stream, make sure you bring up Rick Scott. He really loves Rick Scott a lot. He has a lot of very favorable takes about him, especially regarding the his what I believe was the largest Medicare fraud in history at the time. Is that right?
Yeah, with
Medicaid?
Columbia HCA Healthcare. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Hell
he
yeah.
pled the
That's
fifth
awesome.
75 times in a deposition. Now he's our
That's
senator.
incredible. That's incredible. Okay, so build high-speed rail. It's EA.
Yes.
Public high-speed rail. Raising taxes on billionaires.
Absolutely. Yes.
Implement a federal cap on rent increases.
Yes, we need rental protections and tenant protections.
End the war on Iran.
Yes.
End American aid to Israel.
Yes. Support.
Sanction Israel to stop the genocide in Gaza.
Yes, I support the BDS movement.
Shrink the U.S. military and retrain soldiers to build infrastructure in the United States.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Support that.
Recognize Taiwan as a part of China.
I support that. Yeah, the United States, this kind of arm's length militarily funding Taiwan, this belligerent kind of antagonistic approach with one of our largest economic and trading partners, I think it's stupid. The United States cannot continue with this level of brinksmanship where we're constantly on the edge of war with so many people that are really, again, intertwined with our economy. So no, it's not our business. We should not be propping up a proxy state for the United States to, again, commit ourselves in a stupid and insane military conflict.
Excellent. And end the war in Ukraine.
Support. Yeah, we need a diplomatic approach. Enough people have died.
Excellent. Okay. And then I have 3 very quick sentences for you. You can fill in the blank. I'm just going to read them and then say whatever comes to mind. Think of it as like kind of like therapy when they show you like the weird like hand drawing sort of thing. And they're like, oh, this reminds me of like a butterfly or like, my parental trauma or something like that. Okay.
Sounds good.
You can just fill in the blank here at the end. The biggest problem in America right now is
the corrupt billionaire class. They are taking more and more of the economy. We're seeing the highest levels of income and wealth inequality in our history. And we have a federal administration in the Trump administration that has more billionaires represented in it than any administration before. We are very much on the track towards becoming an oligarchy, and billionaire wealth and income and wealth inequality is the great issue of our time. And every other issue that we're experiencing is downstream of that class warfare that is going on.
fill in the blank. The political system is broken because
of money in politics. We have a corrupt campaign finance industry where members of Congress don't only rely on corporations for their corporate PAC donations and their financial support to get reelected. They're increasingly supplementing their own salaries by trading stocks while in Congress. And so money in politics is another one of the great issues of our time, especially since the Citizens United v. FEC decision in 2010 that has allowed unlimited corporate spending in our politics. We just saw Elon Musk spend somewhere in the realm of $275 million to buy a presidential election in 2024. And he wasn't the only one. There is more and more money being spent by a fewer and fewer number of individuals in our political economy, and it is being used to elect more extreme, far-right, authoritarian members of their choice. And so if we're going to reform the political system, we need to ensure the public financing of elections, in addition to many other measures, including banning partisan gerrymandering, making Election Day a holiday, universal voter registration, same-day party change, many other measures that will make our society more democratic and less authoritarian.
Excellent. And last but not least, Jeffrey Epstein's best friend was
Donald Trump.
Hell yeah.
We're seeing that.
Wow. Thank you so much. Wait. I think you were going to say something there. I'm sorry. I cut you off. I was just very excited to hear that was indeed
How many
Jeffrey Epstein's best friend.
how many tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of redactions have there been in the Epstein files so far? I mean, there's never been a more obvious pedophile in public life than Donald Trump. And I think it's really insane that anyone would argue otherwise with the mountain of evidence that's out there.
Hell yeah. All right. Oliver Larkin, thank you so much. Appreciate you being here. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. It was great being with you.